Welcome to This Is Living with Josh and Erin Hawley.
We all the time, day to day, we face those choices. Okay, today, what's going to be my priority? Today, what am I going to go after? Today, how am I going to handle the busyness and the competing demands?
Jesus tells his followers that those who come to him will have life and life abundantly, or life to the full. So that's sort of the idea that we're after.
There's a good life out there. Let's go and find it.
Hey, everybody, I'm Josh Hawley.
And I'm Erin Hawley. Welcome back to our home.
It's nice to see you again, Erin.
It is. Good morning.
Hello. How you doing?
So we're doing great.
Yeah, it's been a busy week, hasn't it?
Yes, very busy.
The holidays are getting close.
Yes.
These things are getting more and more active around our house. Fun times. These are exciting times.
Absolutely. We've got one bedroom's already decorated for Christmas.
Yeah, and has been since July. But, you know, that's, there you go. That's the beauty of our kids' different personalities.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. The thing about our house is that I find is that it's never dull here. You know, I mean, there's never, some people talk about having downtime with their kids and just, you know, or the kids, our favorite is the kids, parents will talk about their kids sleep until 8:30 in the morning, you know. Hey, if you got tips about how your kids sleep till 8:30 in the morning, you know, please contact us.
Right away.
Our kids don't sleep past 6, you know, no matter what time zone they're in. So anyhow, but it's all good. We're so glad to be here.
Absolutely.
And we're thinking about, speaking of kids and parents, and boys in particular, we've got, of course, the 2 boys and then Abigail. And in fact, Abigail just turned 1 year old.
It's hard to believe.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's incredible. So our boys, and Elijah had a birthday. Elijah's our older boy. So Elijah is 9 now. Blaise is about to be 7. And Abigail just turned 1 year old. So that's another reason why, you know, not a lot of sleep in the household. But, you know, as our boys, so our 2 older boys, Elijah and Blaise, are school-age boys now in 3rd grade and 1st grade. And, you know, we've been thinking a lot about what it looks like to raise them to be good men, raise them to be followers of Jesus, raise them to be the kind of men that that we know that they can be. And you know, it's a challenge to raise kids ever, at least it is for us, and I bet it has been throughout history. But right now, raising boys is particularly a challenge.
Yeah, I think as we think about the characteristics that we often see in boys, not always, but often, our kiddos, certainly our boys at least, embody those. They are very active. They love to run. They love to jump. If they are on playground equipment, they will figure out the most dangerous, incorrect way to use it. You know, you see the guidance, you know, go down the slide. Well, we're going to not only go up the slide, but climb on top of the structure on top of the slide that's just there for support. So they're very active. They like challenges. They move around a lot. They're loud. And they just are boys.
Yeah. Boys 100% of the time. Boys right now as a whole in our country are having kind of a hard time, though. If you look at the data, if you look at the research on this, boys are facing a lot of headwinds, a lot of challenges. And, you know, Erin and I were just looking at some of the numbers on this, which particularly stand out to us as the parents of 2 small boys. You know, for instance, boys are 4 times as likely as girls to be suspended or expelled from early childhood and K-12 learning environments. Boys are twice as likely as girls to be labeled emotionally disturbed and twice as likely to be diagnosed with a behavioral or a learning disorder. Here's another stat, Erin, that particularly grabbed me. Suicide kills approximately 30,000 American boys and men in the United States every year. And young men, teenagers and then those in their 20s, kill themselves at 4 times the rate of girls. You know, I mean, those are really, really, really stunning numbers and speak, I think, to some of the challenges facing boys right now.
Absolutely. And it's just heartbreaking for those families and for those children who are taking their lives. And as we think about our own boys and what does it mean to raise them up to know and love the Lord? What does it mean to give them a firm foundation? I think one thing we're seeing in school systems across the country is the school is not necessarily suited to young boys. If you look at the data shows over and over again that girls, especially young girls, have the personality traits generally that are more successful in school. So they're typically more organized. They're typically more content to sit, and they're not hearing as much as boys. Sit down all the time. Stop that. Be quiet. As a boy, I could see. I think one researcher described it as boys thinking of school being rigged against them because the things they're good at, the running, the jumping, the gross motor skills, the exuberance, those things aren't necessarily rewarded at school, and so you get this pressure on boys to basically become like girls, at least in the school setting. And so how do we think about raising up our kids in ways that will help them rather than tell them they need to be different.
One thing that stood out to me in that regard, and you're talking about just the plight of boys at school and the challenges that they face. There's a recent study that shows that boys engage more in what's called research called dramatic play, which certainly describes our household.
Swords, guns,
exactly,
fake guns.
Dramatic play, and that is something that is very common for boys. However, the research shows that dramatic play rarely escalates into real aggression, only about 1% of the time. So very, very rarely. But when two researchers recently surveyed the classroom practices of teachers with 4-year-olds, so just a little bit younger than our younger son, Blaise, they found that this style of play, dramatic play, which is most associated with boys, is the least tolerated of all the different forms of play, to the point that about half of the teachers stopped or redirected boys playing with each other at least once a day and often several times a day, whereas fewer than a third of them reported interrupting girls' play. So, there's no, I'm sure, conscious bias there at all, but it's just that the kind of dramatic, exuberant, aggressive, assertive play that boys engage in is not always rewarded in the school setting. And you can understand why that would be the case. I mean, it can seem disruptive. It can seem like, this might escalate into a fight, even though studies show it rarely does. But to your point about the school setting, boys can face challenges there just by the nature of who they are. And we've seen with our own kids. I mean, they're rambunctious. Sitting for long periods of time is a challenge. When we ask them, "What is your favorite part of the school day?" a lot of times the answer we hear is
always
recess.
Yes.
And at recess, it's like, "Oh, what'd you do at recess?" "Oh, I climbed a tree and then I swung from one tree to the other." Yeah, I would kickball. I mean, it's always something. It's rarely, at recess I sat and observed the flowers. I mean, it just, at least with our kids, I mean, it's very dramatic. It's very exuberant, and that's typical of boys. But the challenges that they face in school are typical as well. And this has led to, among other things, it's led to a lot of boys getting diagnosed with ADHD or ADD. One recent study from Michael Gurian, he's a psychologist who does a lot of work with boys. He's written on this subject extensively. Found that boys were very likely to be diagnosed, more likely than girls certainly, to be diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. But one recent survey of his found that from 2,000 schools found that about a third, again, these are his numbers now, a third of schoolboys diagnosed with ADD or ADHD were misdiagnosed. And he goes on to say, I'm quoting him now, this is from his book, Saving Our Sons. While some boys do need medication, millions of males are being medicated unnecessarily with some severe consequences for motivation and growth. And then he points out that 80% of the world's Ritalin is consumed in the United States. And so he points out that this is in many ways a particularly American problem. Those really are eye-catching statistics.
Absolutely. And it seems at the root of that, the sort of this overdiagnosis, is this idea that we want boys to be different. We want them to be different than they were created. We want them, to sit still. And again, there's a time and place for that. But we want them to sit still. We want them to be quieter. We want them to draw in color and basically leave us in peace. And that is not how God made boys. That's certainly not ours. And frankly, it's not how God made girls either.
Yeah.
So they require this active engagement. And there's something beautiful about the boldness and courageousness of young boys. They just approach life with such a zest and exuberance. And Oh my goodness, as parents, I don't want to take that away. I want to train them up to harness that and utilize that. But I want them to keep with them that zest for life, to keep with them that drive, that passion, that competitiveness that just really lights up the world and can make this world a better place.
So I think for those of you who are parents and who are parents of boys, or who have boys in your life, you've got nephews, you've got grandsons, you've got friends who have small boys. Maybe you're a teacher yourself, or maybe you're a caregiver. I bet that if we're facing these things with our own boys, I bet you are too. And it is so widespread in our society right now, and this challenge is so widespread that it's something that really affects all of us. And here's the thing, Erin, that for me really gets me when you pull the lens out, is that when you have these kids, these boys who struggle in school, who sometimes are medicated, sometimes over medicated according to the research, who are told a lot of times. I think the message that they're told, and this is what you were just saying, is that to be a boy, there's something wrong with being a boy. If you're rambunctious, if you're assertive, if you engage in dangerous activities, like every day at our house, then there's something wrong with you, and we need to iron that out of you, so to speak. And that message over time, internalized and repeated and forced on boys, that's where we see, as these boys get older, they become teenagers. We see the statistics that we were talking about earlier, where we see young men feeling more isolation, young men feeling alienated, young men, withdrawing from society. Young men are now, we know they're leaving education.
Yeah.
I mean, one recent number, I said 71% of high school seniors who are boys say that they don't like school. That number has increased dramatically just in the last 20 years. We know from recent research done and reported on by the Wall Street Journal that now 60% of college undergraduates across all majors and fields are female and 40% are male. That's great for women, but why? That's way out of skew with the population as a whole, which is the concern there. Why only 40%? And experts predict that number will be 2 to 1. It'll be a 2 to 1 ratio of females to males in college within just a few years, given the trend lines. That's not a good development. I mean, people should go to college if they want to go to college. Don't tell anybody what to do. But when a number like that is so out of skew with the population as a whole and over time, and when the trend line is what it is, I think you really worry about it, and you really worry about the social consequences of it.
Absolutely. And we see the same thing in law school and medical school. And again, it's great for women. We've got women going in increasing numbers and never heard of numbers, and that's fantastic. But we also need our men there. We need our boys who want to be doctors and lawyers, as well as engineers and scientists and builders and whatever it is they want to do. But we see too many boys and men, as the Wall Street Journal reports, that are sort of giving up on life even before it's began. They decide not to go to college. They decide not to pursue education. And this is a problem for society. It's a problem for future families. And it's something we want to think about as we're raising boys.
Yeah. And so for us, I think it's a personal issue because we're parents and because we have the responsibility and the great privilege to raise boys. And so, it's not just it's something you read about in the paper. It's not just a set of numbers on a page, but it's something we've got to grapple with. How are we going to raise our own boys? How are we going to give them that sense of momentum and that sense of possibility and that sense of encouragement? And I guess one of the things that we've talked about in our own family is the number one thing that we want our boys to hear, that we think is rooted and grounded in what the Lord says and what God says about all of us, but about boys is that they are good. It's a good thing to be a boy, just like it's a good thing to be a girl. And there's nothing wrong with that. God, what's the Bible say? God made us male and female. In his image, he made us male and female. That's amazing. We're made in the image of God. And so that's true for women. That's true for men. And so for boys, I think the thing that above all the message we want to send to our boys is, hey, it's great to be a boy. It's more than okay. It's wonderful. That assertiveness, that adventurousness, that rambunctiousness. Yeah, it's got to be trained. You bet it does. It needs to be channeled to find healthy outlets. But it's a good thing. And the core message that we as mom and dad want to send to our boys is, man, you're good. The Lord has made you to do good work, and it's a good thing to be a boy.
I love that. And some of the best parenting advice I got was from our pediatrician when the boys were quite small. And I always had both of them in tow, and they were, climbing up on the benches, and he had a scale in there. Anyway, it was not pleasant.
This is back, can I just say, every restaurant in town knew who we were. People would see us when we walked in, and it was like, oh, let us break out, we'll get the broom and the mop handy because it won't be long. It
wasn't that bad.
Oh, maybe it was just when they ate with me, or when Daddy's taking them,
So we've got these two boys in the doctor's office, and the doctor, the pediatrician, could tell I was just frazzled. And he just looked at me, and he has several brothers, and as I think a dad of 4 kids with his wife. And he says, these are going to be wonderful traits when they're 25. And I just love that idea, that this strong-willedness, this ability to go against the flow, to sort of be headstrong even, and to take risks and to adventure, these things are going to be wonderful when our boys are 25. And we just have to keep them alive that long.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. But I think for parents out there who are thinking about this, and for teachers and for grandmas and grandpas, I mean, as we've thought through it, the first place we start with what the Word of God says, and the Word of God says is that we're good, and that we're created male and female, and that's good. But it also goes on to say that the Lord has particular roles for us to play, and that that boys as boys are summoned into great adventure of following the Lord. We want our kids to follow God, but there's unique things that the Lord has for them to do with those qualities that are often associated with boys. So with their assertiveness and their adventurousness and their spirit of independence, and those things are things that really can be directed and used for tremendous good. And so as parents, we're trying to think about, how can we play our part in helping our boys own those possibilities, and then direct that energy and direct those qualities into something that's really good and really, really healthy.
I love that idea of direction and purpose. And I think one thing we see with both our boys and girls is this real need for purpose. It's often said that, the 2 most important days in your life, the day you were born and the day you find out why. I think there is something biblical about that. We were created by God, and we were created with specific purposes in mind. And so helping our children understand these traits that they have, and what God might be calling them to use them for in his kingdom, and just giving them a sense of mission and purpose. And that seems to be especially important to boys. They don't like to waste time. Just a couple of nights ago, one of our kiddos was resisting taking a shower. I said, it's a waste of time.
That's right. We said, why don't we? Yes. Have you taken a shower? No. Why not? It's a waste of time.
And well, I might disagree. Cleanliness is not a waste of time. There's this real sense of I love it. Like he wants to be playing. He wants to be throwing the football. He wants to be working on his baseball arm. He's got things to do, and taking a shower interrupts that. So just this purpose driven life, as Rick Warren would say, I think is something that's really important for our boys and girls.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as we think about what does it look like to call our boys towards that purpose, to call them towards being the men that they were made to be. I mean, for my own part, we each have roles to play in the family as mom and dad. For my own part as dad, this is something that I've thought about, and I'm still thinking about every single day. I think about how today can I help my boys see what a responsible man looks like, and what it looks like to grow up and be a man who is going to be courageous, who's going to be strong, who's going to help other people. And so for me, I feel like part of my role in the family, my role in the household, is to help the boys see that, listen, we use our strength to serve other people. We use our sense of adventure to try to bring breakthrough for others. If you want to go out and blaze a trail, that's fantastic. Go do that, and then think about how that can help other people. I mean, this is what God gives you: strength so that others can benefit. He gives you purpose so that you can bring others with you. And we try to break that down into little things during the day. One of the things I've been talking about our boys recently, again, they're 9 and almost 7, is little things like, hey, we don't leave messes for other people. When we make a mess, it's part of being a man. Yeah, exactly. If we make a mess, then we clean it up, because if you don't, then you leave it for mama, or you leave it for dad, or you leave it for somebody else, and part of being an adult and part of being a responsible man is if you make a mess, you clean it up. And then once you do that, then maybe we could look around and see where might somebody else need some help. Mom has a lot to do. Maybe mom could use some help with something. We could go offer to help her. Maybe baby sister, maybe we could help with baby sister, maybe her room, you could pick up some of the toys in baby sister's room. Maybe you could help go get baby sister's blanket. They look like little things, but I hope the principle there of modeling, we're looking for how we can use the resources we have, our energy, our strength, our assertiveness. We can use those for other people and to bring good to other people. I think that's a core quality of what it means to be a man. And we know that's true from Scripture, because in Genesis, God gives the commission to Adam and to Eve. He says to go out and to make the world fruitful. Go out there and cultivate the world. In the context of a garden, cultivate the garden and make it fruitful. And for men, I think that call is go use your adventurousness. Go use your independence and your strength and your assertiveness. Go use that to bring order out of chaos. Go use that to bring a place of safety for other people. Go use that to push forward the frontiers of what we've talked about in earlier episodes of the sense of the culture of heaven, and a place of peace, a place of safety and love. And that's part of what we're trying to teach our boys, or at least what I'm hoping to, with just these little things. Pick up your room, help your little sister, help mom and dad.
I really love that. And I love this idea of service out of strength. I think that's something that God calls us all to. And then I think as we think about being parents to boys, I would just encourage myself and those listening to not be afraid to discipline. There's this idea of self-discipline, which is sort of an oxymoron when you're talking about children. Scripture teaches us that we need to train a child in the way he or she should go. And so there's this calling, this authority given by God to us to discipline. And there's this idea of circumcision of the heart, where God looks at us and calls us to be what he wants us to be, and to submit to him, to take this unbridled passion and energy and bounciness and direct it toward his vision and his purpose. And I love the story. They did a research study of small children on a playground. And the playground, had these small fenced-in borders, and the administrator's like, this playground's way too small. The kids don't have anywhere to play, so they took out the fences. And something really interesting happened. The children actually played more in the interior. They felt safer with the boundaries on the outside of the playground, even though they had more freedom when the fences were taken away. And I think this is a really biblical principle for parents, in that when we are raising boys and we are raising girls and we're raising children, they desire that we set boundaries, because those boundaries mean they're safe. They mean they're cared for. And so while we appreciate and love their exuberance and their joy, there's also times to sit still. And it's our authority as parents and our responsibility as parents to help train these gifts the boys have been given.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing, from the perspective of a dad, and for myself, the other thing that is important that our boys and young men hear from dads are a couple of phrases that are sometimes hard to say. One of them is, "I was wrong." I know I personally have a hard time. Erin's teased me many times that my version of "I was wrong" is "I was," well, let's just move on.
Elijah did ask me once whether boys were smarter than girls. This has been several years ago. And I was like, no, absolutely not. And I said, why did you say that? And he goes, well, you're wrong all the time, and Dad never is.
My first reaction was, oh my gosh, what an intelligent child. And then I realized, maybe Daddy needs to be saying I was wrong a little more often. And I think that that's important, for boys to hear from their fathers in particular, is that, hey, we make mistakes, partly because it's not as if the kids don't know we make mistakes. I mean, that's obvious. But I think it gives it tells your boys that, hey, it's okay to make a mistake. That Daddy makes mistakes. You can see that. And Daddy can say he was wrong. And then the other thing is that I am sorry. And this is something, that really I've been trying to challenge myself with just in these recent months, is to say to the kids, sometimes I'm too short with the kids. Sometimes I get it wrong. I think that this boy did something. Turns out I was wrong about that. Actually, is that he didn't really hit his brother, or he didn't, his teacher thought he said that at school. And turns out actually he didn't say it. And so when I have falsely accused, or when I've been too abrupt, then I think to go to them and say, listen, Daddy made a mistake and I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? I'm sorry. And I have to be honest with you, it's hard to say. I don't find it easy for those words to come out of my mouth. But I think it's really important for boys to hear that, of course, from any adult and from their parents, but maybe particularly from their dads. They need to have it modeled that it's okay to make a mistake, that when we make mistakes, we own the mistake and we ask for forgiveness, and that we're not called to be perfect. And I think that's something that so many people struggle with and struggle under, is this sense of, boy, I've got to be perfect in order to be worthwhile. I've got to be perfect in order to be of any value. And that just isn't true. We're inherently valuable because of who God has made us. God has made us amazing. That's what gives us our values, how he's made us. And I think just giving that message to our kids and to our boys to say that, you don't have to be perfect. It's okay to make a mistake. That doesn't mean you're not diminished in that way, But it's also part of taking responsibility too. When we make mistakes, we own them, and we apologize to people and we make it right.
I love that. And I love, as a mom, seeing Josh model that for our boys. So you just see their faces light up. I know we've told the story about, the Coke incident and the huge mess all over the ceiling.
This is when one of our boys, we had a can of Coke in the freezer that I think Daddy had left overnight in the freezer. And it had, it hadn't quite exploded, but it was huge. And we put it in the sink. Yeah. And then one of our boys went to it and we told him, don't do it. Don't touch it. Sit down. But he went ahead and opened it, and it sprayed everywhere.
Yeah. Ceiling, windows, everywhere. We're still finding Coke in places. Yeah. But as part of that, Josh now, routinely tells the boys about the messes that he makes, and they love it. They do love it. Yeah. And just that sort of camaraderie and that feeling that they're in it with you, and they really don't have to be perfect, is so valuable for them to see and hear from you. So thank you. And I think something else that is easy to overlook in boys is that they're tender. They're kids. And boys can be so exuberant. They're often told, I know I was as a child, don't cry, those sorts of things. And they absorb this from culture, that they're supposed to be strong and tough. And while those things can be very good, these are still small boys with really big emotions. And the little things, or what we perceive as being little, can really hurt. I remember when one of our little guys was little and he couldn't read as well as his older brother yet. And it just destroyed him.
Very frustrating.
So this idea that, even though they're so exuberant, even though they're so bold, even though they're so loud, inside them is just this little boy who needs to be affirmed, and who needs to be told, I believe in you. And even when they get it wrong, there's also a time to say, that was a bad choice, but I believe in you. You'll do better next time. And so just that recognition of beneath that little boy that's trying to be tough, there is just this small child.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a question for you. When our boys are 25, you mentioned earlier that their pediatrician a few years ago had said, hey, this is going to be a great quality when they're 25. When our boys are 25, what do you, as their mom, what do you hope they will be? Who do you hope that they will be?
That's a great question. And I think what it boils down to is I really hope that when they're 25, and for Abigail as well, that they just know deep in their soul, that their entire being, that they are known and loved by Jesus. Just this deep sense of identity. Because it seems to me if they know that they're inherently worthwhile, that they're valuable just because they are, just because they're God's son, then they are able to work out of that, to do whatever it is God has called them to, and to be missional, and to have vision, but to have at this core this knowledge that they are deeply loved just as they are.
Yeah, that's all. I love that. That's awesome. I would hope for that as well, just that they would have a passion for the Lord, that they would have this great sense of purpose in knowing they're loved by the Lord and wanting to follow after him. And then I would hope they'd have a great sense of purpose and thinking that, you know what, God has called us to do something with our lives. And this is something I feel like, men, I can only speak for myself as a man, but men long for. They long to have a sense of purpose, that their lives mean something. Men want to leave a legacy. They want to make a difference in the world. And I know that already our boys, they wouldn't probably put it in quite those terms, but they want to matter, and they want to do something that matters. It's part of the longing for adventure, I think. So I hope that our boys will see that God has called them to be part of his purpose in bringing, his goodness and bringing his love and bringing his grace and bringing it to the world and changing the world. We really are. We're called to change the world, and we're sent here to change the world and to make it a better place. And, as believers, we think to help bring the culture of heaven. And to extend the Lord's love across the world in every sphere of life. And that is such an incredible mission. It's such an incredible adventure. And I just hope that at 25, our boys will just be gripped by that. And they'll also think that, the way God has made me, the strength he's given me, the courage that I have, the spirit of independence and assertiveness, all those boyish qualities, that those are good things, and that they're able to channel those and use those for the benefit of other people and for their families. I also hope they'll have a job.
Yes.
To say, if they want to get their BA or their PhD or their, whatever, that's all great. But above all, get a job. Get a job. And we hope they'll want to be fathers and husbands, and they'll do that on their own timeline. But, we hope our boys want to get married and have families. And you think about how you really make a difference in the world. I think there's having a family, being a husband, I'll just say for myself, being a husband and being a father, I think are the highest callings in my life, and the most important things that God has called me to do, and the way he's called me to help change the world.
I love that. And I think as we think about raising boys, raising our kids, I think that's just something to encourage me, is that's the highest calling we have. And then we're not alone in it. None of us are perfect parents. None of us are perfect parents of boys, but we have God to help us in this incredible vision.
Yeah. So just thinking practically, babe, how does this play out? When we think about how are we going to affirm our boys' boyishness and say, hey, that's good. We don't want you to be something else. We don't want you to be somebody else. We don't want you to be a girl. We don't want our girl to be a boy. But then how do we work on just day to day channeling those things, nurturing them and channeling them into positive expressions?
I think one piece of advice that's really helped me as a mom is to say yes as much as possible. And when you've got two boys and a baby girl, it is so tempting to say no. No, do not do that experiment. No, don't climb that tree. No, don't do this. No, don't do that. And I've loved this advice to say yes as much as possible, because our kids get no all of the time. And so we say yes. We say yes to science experiments. We say yes to baking with mom and baking with dad. We say yes to climbing trees. Our boys climb trees. Recently we were at church actually, and we can stand and look at the trees, and for inside we're visiting with some friends, and I look out and the off-duty police officer is standing under the trees because he's worried about how high our boys are.
Yeah. They're really far up there, he said when I came out.
So yes, we let our boys climb trees and play in streams, and then do stuff with us. So.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you're great at is projects around the house and in the yard. They love to, one of the things we did this past year is they had a huge garden, because they love to get into the dirt. They love to dig. They love to plant stuff. They love to tend to things.
They do, and to see produce.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
There's that principle of fruitfulness and increase. Yeah. But they love to be part of that, and so creating those spaces. Again, this is something that you do really, really well. Creating those spaces in our home and in the family life where it's like, we're gonna have a garden this year, and that's gonna be something that you get to go do. Also something you have to take. It's got to be watered, and it's got to be, you've got to go out and get the peppers off the plant or the corn off the stalk, and Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I don't know if I've told you this, but a neighbor who was trying to start a garden asked me the other day, it's been a couple months ago now, but he said, how is your garden so beautiful? Nobody ever waters it. And the thing is, the boys water it, but there's so little you can't see them over the fence.
Right, exactly.
So,
they water all the time.
so the boys are watering it.
Right,
yes.
exactly.
So,
I just think that there was something that's really awesome about that. Just saying that, saying yes, and then creating these spaces to have these kind of projects and adventures where they're getting to use their adventurousness, they're getting to use their energy. Something else we do is we have a fenced yard, and we often say, go outside and play. Like the house is not a jungle gym, but hey, if you want to go run and play, that's awesome. Take that ball and go right outside and go bounce it against the fences, and just go after it out there. And so creating that time where, we have the playtime before dinner, we have, the projects that we're doing.
So, and one thing I love that you help me with is family dinners. There's a study by a Harvard education professor who actually found that family dinners were more important to kids than even playtime or reading stories or those sorts of things. Just this idea of intentionality and sitting down together, and you're really good about sort of helping the boys know how to behave. So we try to sit at dinner. We try to ask questions like adults at dinner. But even more than that, it's just this idea of being together and being intentional. Yeah. And I know you make a lot of sacrifices so that you're able to be home so that we can do that.
Yeah, I think there is. I remember actually somebody, an older father, giving me a piece of advice when I first became a father, when we had our first boy. And he said, there just is no substitute for them seeing you across from that dinner table, and it may not be possible to do it every night. May have work obligations, have to travel. He said, but just day in and day out, week in and week out, to see you there. And he said, that's really, you can tell your sons a lot of things, and you should teach them, but what they're really going to learn from you is what you do. And they're going to learn that through your presence above all else. And so that's something we both strive for, is just to be present. And I'll just say, I make a lot of mistakes as a parent, as a father, and as a husband, like a lot. Somebody asked me the other day, if I had, if I was a paragon of fatherhood or something, and I was like, if you want a paragon of mistake making, then I can come talk to me. But I think at the end of the day, that above all, we're trying to be present, and it's like, well, I might make a lot of mistakes, might get it wrong, might need to say I'm sorry, but we're present. And we're showing up. And I just would say to the dads out there, encourage you, man, just show up. Showing up and being there. You don't have to get it right. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know what the right things to do. But just being there is so, so, so significant.
I love that encouragement, and for moms too, because we make mistakes all the time that are very apparent. And reminds me, in a parenting class at church once, the lecturer was explaining how there were two groups of children in London during the bombing. And the
This is World War II,
yes,
right? This is during the Blitz,
Yeah, during the Blitz. So World War II, London, really scary time to be in London. And so what happened is the families who could afford to, they sent their children out of the country to, stay with aunts or uncles or even just random people who offered up their homes. And children of those with less means just stayed in London with their families. And what they found was that those children did so much better, that the gift of presence, even in the midst of terrifying times, was so valuable that just the fact of their family being with them made such a difference.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. That's awesome. We're so glad that you spent time with us today. Thanks for spending part of your day with us. Thanks for having us into your life. And for those of you out there who have boys, God bless you. We're with you. We're praying for you. Yeah, you pray for us. We'll pray for you. And no, it's wonderful. And we sure enjoyed seeing you. See you again soon. Well, thanks for joining us for This is Living with Josh and Erin Hawley. Life can be more. Don't settle for less. Join us next time for a fresh episode. And until then, we'd love to hear from you. You can connect with us by visiting joshhawley.com and sign up for our email list. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And most importantly, share this podcast with a friend and leave us a review on Google Play or Apple Podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening to This is Living.
There's a good life out there. Let's go and find it. Paid for by Josh Hawley for Senate. Approved by Josh Hawley.